Good afternoon. I know there is so much visiting to be done. I have to say, I think this is the largest crowd. This is the largest crowd we have had in Morse Auditorium since before COVID. So I'm thrilled, and I think Robert Hamburger would be particularly thrilled to know that you are all here. Of course, we are gathered this afternoon in memory of Robert J. Hamburger, all of the afternoon's events. Many of you knew him. He was a luminary in the Asian art community here in Massachusetts and New England. In his professional life, he served as professor of medicine at Boston University School of Medicine, and of course was a much beloved doctor. But we are here for his great personal passion. He was a founding member of the Asian Art Society of New England and served on Harvard Art Museum's collections committee for Asian art for many years, and was truly a passionate collector. So I think it is particularly fitting that we are here in the Edward Sylvester Morse Auditorium to remember him and to hear about a fascinating aspect of the Peabody Essex Museum's Asian art collections. But before I introduce our distinguished speaker, I just want to tell you a little bit about some other projects that are coming up related to Asian export art. Of course, the Peabody Essex Museum's relationship with Asia and Asian art dates to its very founding in 1799. We have been collecting and studying Asian art from the very beginning. And am I going forward here? Let's see. No, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm so out of practice. I haven't been at this podium in 2 years. Kai, what am I doing? Midori, do you know? What? There it is. You think you feel at home at a podium, and yet you take 2 years off and you've forgotten everything. The middle one. No, not pointed there. Nope. Nope. So it's not going to work for Midori either unless she has the golden thumb. I didn't practice, but Midori did practice. So let's see. Kai to the rescue. Maybe can you extend it? I got it. Okay. Yeah, we're still rusty. I was feeling invincible. I had COVID 3 weeks ago, and I thought the world is my oyster because I am Teflon now, but clearly out of practice in this. Okay, all right, let's go forward one, Kai. So I wanted to just whet your appetite for the project that I am furiously working on right now, Power and Perspective, Early Photography in China, which is an exhibition drawn almost entirely from Pam's remarkable collections of 19th century Chinese photography, with some very spectacular loans from MoMA, the Met, and the Getty, among many other places. And this really is going to highlight in the first major way our truly extraordinary collections of Chinese photography. Here, a snapshot of the catalog cover, which is literally printing as we speak in Istanbul, and one of John Thompson's luminous photographs, Island Pagoda. All right, now the test. What happens if I do this here? Another one of John Thompson's photographs, which of course, as you can imagine, I'm particularly fond of looking at with a microscope because of all of the extraordinary carved ivory in this photo. And we are using Power and Perspective as an opportunity to get out I think close to 20 pieces of carved ivory from our collections that that mimic works in this wonderful photograph. One of which, of course, is the carved ivory boat, and I hope you can see they're all up there in their original 19th century boxes. But well, here I'm going to back up for 1 second. Oh, can I? Maybe I can't. Another project that I also want to mention before I talk about this slide is Canadian contemporary muralist Shayla Keeley, who will be doing a work here in our galleries in November. And she spent a tremendous amount of time before COVID with 19th century Japanese collections, primarily assembled by Edward Sylvester Morse. And in addition to her own contemporary works, we'll have quite a number of the things that inspired her drawings from Morse's collections on display. So I hope you will come back for both of those projects in September and November. But the really extraordinary news for this afternoon, and word has gotten a little bit out into the world, we sent out a press release about a month ago, is the extraordinary gift to the Peabody Essex Museum of Dr. Frederick Schneider's collection of Japanese cloisonné enamels. Fred is literally the authority on this subject, having written the book on the left, available for all of you in the Peabody Essex Museum shop. So I want to encourage you to get that. Fred has been a passionate and devoted collector of this material for many years, and really has taken a truly scholarly approach to this collection. So in the over 900 works in his collection, he has things that date to as early as the 1600s, right up to works by contemporary practitioners of Japanese cloisonné enamel. Here he is in his apartment with just a few of works. And I just have a few slides from an article that will be coming out later this year in September on Fred's collection. Here, a truly miraculous and beautiful box with an imperial provenance with scenes from the Tale of Genji on it. Really luminous vase with these amazing egrets that's in applique jour technique. All of the techniques practiced by Japanese cloisonné enamelers throughout the long history of this technique are represented in Fred's collections. And so it's truly an astonishingly beautiful collection, but it's also a deeply scholarly collection that is going to allow people for hundreds of years to come to the Peabody Essex Museum and delve very deeply into this subject, not only because of the extraordinary works of art that Fred has assembled in his collection, but also the supporting collections. So Fred has assembled really remarkable collections of 19th century ephemera, photographs, trade catalogs of many of the retailers of Japanese cloisonné enamels. He's also interviewed contemporary practitioners and is, as a scholar of this material, has compiled truly astonishing notes on so many aspects of the collection. So this is an incredibly multifaceted and rich collection that will allow us to expand our study of this material so much. Here I also, another really gorgeous both silver and cloisonné enamel with these wonderful detail of wisteria, blossoms and leaves. And here's the last one. Certainly, as I mentioned, Fred has really incredible work by contemporary practitioners. This is a very deco version from Ando Company from the 1930s. But I think the detail of this and just the delicate shading of that enamel is truly wonderful to see. And I mentioned this ephemera. This is just a tiny sampling of the binders and binders of really rich research material that we're looking forward to adding to the collections of the Phillips Library. We will have selections from the collection on display, not only in our permanent galleries, but also in changing exhibitions. But the entire collection will be accessible to collectors and researchers at our collection center in Rowley, Massachusetts, which is the home of both the museum's collections and the Phillips Library. So it will really be one-stop shopping for the study of Japanese cloys enamel. In addition to this incredibly generous gift, Fred has provided very generous support that will not only allow us to care for and store these collections in perpetuity, but also make it possible for us to continue to add to the collection over time and be able to bring scholars to Salem and Rowley to study this remarkable collection. So I want to thank him. I want to thank his partner, Lynn, for making this really extraordinary and incredibly exciting gift to the Peabody Essex Museum. We've been talking about it for a long time, and it's really wonderful to be able to celebrate this publicly. And I'm delighted that Fred and Lynn are here with us this afternoon. Would you like to say anything? I think Catherine's right behind you with a mic.
I hope you will have years of enjoyment of some small bit of what my enjoyment has been.
We really look forward to thinking about all the many ways in which we can be using and researching the collection. It's incredibly exciting. Now I am absolutely delighted to introduce my dear friend and colleague, Midori Oka, who currently serves as the Associate Director of the Mary Griggs Burke Center for Japanese Art at Columbia University. We claim her as our own. She's the former Associate Curator of Japanese Art here at the Peabody Essex Museum, and Midori will present a fascinating lecture on one of PEM's Japanese treasures. Please join me in welcoming Midori Oka.
Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for coming here today. I am Midori Oka, and I am delighted to be back at the Peabody Essex Museum amongst family, friends, and former colleagues. Sorry. Excuse me. So elegant, right? Sorry. My husband, Bruce McLaren, and I have known Robert and Marilyn. Where are you, Marilyn? Okay. For many years. I first met Bob actually when I was a research associate or assistant at the Museum of Fine Arts almost 20 years ago. And I have forever etched on my mind his infectious smile. And that smile was always accompanied with a twinkle in his eye when he would come to the museum to talk about Japanese paintings. We will miss him dearly. I would like to thank Marilyn Hamburger, Mary Glossband, and Karina Corrigan for making this talk possible today. So my talk today is about the so-called, we call it the fish scroll here in the Peabody Essex Museum's collection. I can't just give a talk, so I will be reading some of it, but sometimes I will not have to read from my text. It is a highly unusual work, as you will see up above. Yes, so this is the scroll. It's actually very large, and it's very unusual in that it was actually made as a design for a piece of textile, which you see over here. I think the scroll is almost life-size, but not quite as large as the textile, which I will be talking about later on. While there are other textiles that are being used in this festival, which is held in Nagasaki, called the Kunchi Festival, This one is known to be like the best of the group. Also, this is also very unusual in that I have not been able to find any other preliminary drawings for festival float as this one. And I know from experience that once I say never, there will always be something that comes up. But so far in my research, I have not come across any. Okay. So today for this talk, I will first begin with a brief introduction to the relationship between Japan and the sea. And then before getting into the pemfish scroll, I would like to familiarize you with other images from this genre of fish paintings from Japan. And then I will introduce the artist, Haranande, and how he was representative of the artistic community specific to Nagasaki during the Edo period, which is about from 1600 to 1868. I also have some images to share with you today from a conservator who worked on the conservation of the scroll back in I want to say 2007-ish, 7, 8, 9-ish maybe. And then we will look at the various creatures of the sea that are represented in the scroll and then on the textile. And then finally, I will contextualize the scroll by showing you images from the festival itself. And I'm hoping to be up here for about 45 minutes. Okay. All right. I'm sorry that text is so small over there, but I promise the other ones aren't like that. As you may know, Japan is an island nation on the edge of the Pacific Ocean, which along with China and Korea constitute what we know geographically today as East Asia. It is primarily made of islands off the coast of mainland China and the Korean Peninsula. So there are 4 main islands, Hokkaido, Honshu, Kyushu, and Shikoku, and thousands of other smaller islands that constitute Japan. And most of these tiny islands are not inhabited. Japan's creation myth states that the brother and sister gods, Izanagi and Izanami, from a floating bridge in heaven, stirred the waters below with a special spear, and that the brine from it became the Japanese islands. So this is a painting from the collection of the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, that is showing Izanagi stirring the waters with his special spear. And you can see the water as represented by the waves below. So Izanami and Izanagi, they also produced a pantheon of gods and goddesses, most importantly, Amaterasu, or the sun goddess. Legendary beliefs are that the Japanese imperial family today are direct descendants of the sun goddess, and rituals associated with this belief continue to this day, especially at Ise Shrine, where Amaterasu, the sun goddess, is believed to reside. This is all associated with Shinto, considered to be the indigenous religion of Japan, as opposed to Buddhism, which of course was imported from India via China and Korea. Being an island nation, therefore, Japan has intimately been associated with the seas in various ways, whether it may be as a source of food for consumption or a destructive force, unfortunately most recently experienced in March 2011, when an offshore earthquake created a powerful tsunami with disastrous results to the northern region of Japan and beyond, as you probably all know. Okay. Sorry, the image is a little dark, but there is a tradition of fish paintings in Japan, which can actually be traced back to China, where fish have long symbolized good fortune, such as prosperity, abundance, fertility, and wealth. One of the earliest metaphorical references to fish, in fact, goes back to the 3rd century BCE to a dialogue between the Taoist philosopher Zhuangzi and his friend. and how they contemplate on how fish find their happiness by merely being fish in the water swimming about. Another Chinese reference to fish that holds very strong in Japan today is the legend of the carp that successfully can swim up the Yellow River or Huanghe upstream beyond the Dragon Gate, where it would transform into a dragon. Images of carp leaping out of the water have therefore become synonymous with wishing for one's successes, mostly for boys, I must say. And in Japan, there is an abundance of paintings of this theme. Okay. In Japan, paintings depicting fish are known from around the 14th century, but the genre gained popularity, especially from the Edo period or the 17th century onwards. And by the time of Pem's fish scroll, dated to 1826, it is a firmly established genre of painting. It should be noted that the bulk of these types of paintings were usually of freshwater fish variety, most commonly showing carp. If you wanted to, you can Google the MFA Boston, but just do a object search and type in carp, and you'll see what I mean. The MFA has a very large painting collection, and I think there's at least like 20 that will show this same theme. But I chose to show Ascending Carp by Maruyama Ozui today because, of course, it's beautiful. And you can see that the ascending carp is very poetically hidden there. This Carp and Rising Sun is also from the same school of painters by Nakajima Raisho, which also shows the carp in a much more realistic way than the Ozui. And Karina, I also wanted to share this with you. Yes. Okay. By the 18th century, paintings of fish also became more reflective of popular society at large. So fresh fish, as well as salted and dried varieties, were available in Edo by the 15th century. And within the next century, there came to be an abundance of street peddlers of fish, so much so that the government basically had to start figuring out a way to legalize this. And so the government started to issue permits to people that wanted to become fish peddlers. And then also the system or format of lining up fish on a wood platform. So if you can imagine going to H Mart or ShopRite, oh no, it's Stop and Shop, Stop and Shop, or to Whole Foods, and you see the fish lined up on a bed of ice. It's that same idea, but on a wood platform. So, we see this type of display today too, but that also became established. And so the marketing of fish between wholesale merchants and vendors became solidly established in Japan during the Edo period. Paintings of fish tend to be depicted in the most naturalistic or realistic way, even though the physical grouping of so many variety of sea creatures is just not possible. Perhaps the most famous example of fish paintings is this one by Ito Jakuchu from his series called The Colorful Realm of Living Beings. This artist's father was actually a greengrocer in central Kyoto, and so one can easily speculate that Jakuchu's source of inspiration was perhaps seeing different fish lined up at the fish market. And I think to support this idea, since he presents the fish mostly in profile view, that's also reminiscent of the fish lined up as good at a market. Their diagonal presentation across the picture plane give them a great sense of motion, and the water weeds in the background in the lower, lower right corner also help to suggest their natural habitat, the sea. I hope many of you will have the opportunity to travel to Japan as Japan continues to open up its doors. And if you go to central Kyoto and to the market area today, at night, when they close down the shutters, you'll see that the merchants have painted lots of paintings by images by Jakuchu on their shutters. By contrast, I am showing you this extreme example by Utagawa Yoshikazu, who shows as many varieties of fish and crustaceans as possible, absolutely crowding the painting surface. Among the many paintings that show the enumeration of fish, this work by far shows the most number of fish in one picture. It's been titled 88 Fish. I do not know if somebody actually counted the number of species or objects there are, but 88 is also a reference to abundance, if you will. Okay. And now I wanted to show you a couple of wonderful examples from Fred Schneider's collection of cloisonne. And this one and the next one I will be showing you are both from about 1926, but they were exhibited at the Philadelphia Sesquicentennial, which is the 150th anniversary of the signing of the Declaration of Independence. And I do admit, I had to look that up. But this is a wonderful example, and I just love it when you can trace back through documentation, whether it's visual or written. And here you can see this exact vase on display at the Sesquicentennial. And here's the other one. And again, this one is showing the freshwater fish variety, like the carp. Whereas the previous one, I think it looks more like a tropical fish, if you will. So I am also delighted and so excited that Fred's collection is coming here. And I am looking forward to the day when Salem can be a hub for the study of cloisonne, and not just cloisonne, but the Meiji period, as Fred's extensive collection will be joining this very special Japanese collection here at the Peabody Essex Museum. Okay. Now I wanted to tell you a little bit about the artist, whose name is Haranande. He's actually a pretty obscure artist in that it's very difficult to find any information about him, but we do know that he worked in Nagasaki and he belonged to a large group of painters who were called karae mekiki, or authenticators of Chinese paintings. So I have to give you a 2-sentence history of Nagasaki right now, because it is a very important port city in the Edo period. The Edo period was a time when Japan's doors were basically closed to the outside world. So this meant that nobody could leave it and nobody could come into Japan, except through Nagasaki. And the only Westerners that were allowed to come to Japan were the Dutch, because they were purely traders and did not have any Christian agenda or trying to proselytize. So they were traders. And then we have Chinese, Koreans, and also people from the Ryukyu Islands that were allowed to conduct trade with Japan. But everybody was confined to the port of Nagasaki, and the Dutch had to stay on this little island called Deshima. And there was for example, a Chinese settlement near there as well. I hope you all know that this museum has the greatest collection of Asian export art, and especially the Japanese section of that collection is all about this time in history and place. So I hope you'll go and visit the galleries if you haven't already. So this artist Nande liked to consider himself a Western style painter. And this panel painting up above is like the only example in that mode by him. And by Western style, I mean that you see this prominent horizon here. that is not a feature that you see in East Asian painting. So as Japanese painters got exposure to what little was trickling into Japan through Nagasaki, they got to see things like Italian etchings, for example, that would show a distinct horizon, because in Western painting, after the Renaissance, you have everything converging into one single vanishing point, and the interest is in depicting as deep a space as you can possibly do on a two-dimensional surface. But that was not all happening with East Asian painting. So artists like Nande, who like to call himself a Western style painter, sort of experimented, if you will. And I'm sorry, it's very dark, but I actually saw this in person, and it is indeed dark. So this was the best I could do. But I think you can get a sense that it is showing a west, somewhere in the West, if you will. And the horizon line, which also helps to make it look more dimensional, three-dimensional. Also, he is using tempera on panel, which was not the typical material used when doing paintings like the one below here, which would have been all mineral pigments. This is another work. I got to see both of them at the Nagasaki City Museum around 2007, I think. And then there was maybe another hanging scroll or two by this artist. And I've combed through several books on Nagasaki painters, and I just have not found anything else by him. And I think it makes our fish, I'm sorry, not our, but the PEM's fish scroll all the more special. Sorry. Okay. All right. Now I have some images to share with you that were taken in PEM's conservation studio. This is actually Mimi Levesque, who is an objects conservator, so she did not work on this scroll. But these images, I think, also help you to get a sense of scale of this work. It is really, really large. Back there, this is Pauline Weber, who was one of the paper conservators here, along with Catherine Carey, who worked on the conservation of the scroll, because it was not in the best shape when it came to the museum. Again, please notice how large it is. I wanted to show you an example of, this is one way conservators make notes, if you will. So I've circled the little red, those are little pieces of red paper. And I'm sure that's what Pauline used when she saw areas that needed stabilization, meaning that the pigments were maybe falling off or about to fall off. Meaning you would start to lose some of the surface. So the conservator has put those little, specks of paper there so she can go back and stabilize those areas. As you can see here, that's the end of the scroll. And of course, the end gets the most use and it's handled a lot. And that's why you can see how tattered it is. Now, what is fascinating about Japanese scroll mounting, if you will, is that all the materials used when constructing a scroll, everything is reversible. So they use animal glues, and they are able to basically take anything apart. So that's what you see here, is that the conservator has taken that apart and laid out the individual pieces that make up the end of the scroll. Okay. Here, Pauline is using a Japanese, it's called a hake, or a special wide brush. She probably has like rice glue on there. Japanese sticky rice that they use for sushi, for example, it's really, really sticky. When I was a child, we were still using that as glaze as paste for our paper projects. But conservators, they create things like aged rice glue that are like their treasures that they keep very carefully in small quantities in their jars in their studios. So here you can see Pauline working with her hake, probably doing something to the end there. And this I wanted to show you is how very beautifully that piece has cleaned up. Okay, so that brings me back to the fish scroll itself. Okay. I would also like to take this moment to acknowledge this scroll was purchased in 2000, around 2006, I think, in honor of Keiko Thayer, who is, I am so happy. Keiko-san, where are you? Yes, Keiko is back there. Yes, I had the pleasure of, I first met Keiko at the MFA, but I also had the pleasure of working with her when I was at the Peabody Essex Museum. And she retired right around 2008, I think, as well. But Keiko and her late husband, Jack, were longtime supporters of the Peabody Essex Museum, and especially the Japanese collection. Okay, so the scroll itself, we know that it appeared in Liverpool, England in like 2005, and then this museum was able to make the purchase at auction in 2006. We do not know how it, ended up leaving Nagasaki and then ended up in England, but that, we know this much. And then since I went to visit the Nagasaki City Museum in 2006, when I Google this today, there are some of the internet pages, especially if you Google like the Kunchi Festival or Nagasaki embroidery, the information will come up that now this scroll is with this museum in Salem. Sometimes it'll say in Boston, but I think they don't quite know the difference, unfortunately. Okay, so what is being depicted here is there are 16 varieties of creatures from the sea and a total of 29 of them depicted on this scroll. They are again drawn pretty naturalistically, as if they are swimming in the ocean. And I say that because you can see all these lines implying that they're in the sea. Of course, again, this gathering of all of them in this confined space is just not going to happen. But the artist has tried, for example, to put like the lobster at the bottom of the sea, along with the crab and the octopus. And then the lobster is also seen crawling on rocks. Sea bream here, or tai in Japanese, is sort of considered like the king of fish, if you will. And it's usually consumed for festive occasions or when you want to mark some kind of celebration. All right, I wanted to show you some comparisons between the drawings and actual fish. And when I was doing this research, I had to Google a lot of fish images. And it's not the first time I've been working on this, actually, but I realized that I don't find it to be a very pleasant experience, especially when you get down to like the anglerfish here. But this is the sea bream, or madai, for my Japanese speaking members in the audience. This is the pine cone fish. I know he's kind of cute, isn't he? I don't know why I say he. And then this is the tiger pufferfish, or fugu. And apparently, so in this scroll, all of the specimens, if you will, being depicted, everything is what you can actually catch in Nagasaki and eat there. Because Japanese, we look at fish like that, we think, oh, is that going to be tasty or not? How am I going to prepare it? So But I also found this, and I think this is so Japanese that they take this fugu and turn it into a humorous thing, adding kawaii or cuteness to it. And when truth be told, this fugu is going to turn into sashimi like this for us to consume. I'm guessing that a lot of you do know that fugu is famous for its venomous kidney, I guess. And so you have to be a licensed professional in order to know how to safely remove that part so you do not actually lose your life when you consume the food. And a friend of mine, who's also in the audience, told me today that that was actually something that she said that the GHQ during the Japanese, the American occupation of Japan following World War II, the GHQ is the one that came up with this law. That there, there must have been like sudden deaths happening. All right, now that brings me to the actual textile. I'm sorry, this is not the best image with the binding in the middle, but this is the actual textile. And it's hard to tell here, but I'll go into it. These are all embroidered pieces, and they are individually embroidered and then sewn onto the background, which is this bright red, before they are put on the float themselves to use in the Kunchi Festival. Sorry about this is a little blurry, but anyway, so when I visited Nagasaki in 2007, the curator at the City Art Museum kindly put me in touch with people that organize the festival float event in this area, in this neighborhood of Nagasaki called Yorozuya. So Yorozuya-cho or Yorozuya-machi. So there are 59 neighborhoods in Nagasaki that have festival floats, and their floats are usually themed according to what their neighborhood is known for. So in this Yorozuya neighborhood, it was known that there was a fishmonger, and that's why they have a float that's themed with fish. So here you can see the men taking down boxes that have the embroideries, and they carefully took out some of them, and you can see that's the lobster. And here I wanted to show you a little bit this picture that illustrates the technique, if you will. What is different about this type of embroidery is that it's raised. And it's called Nagasaki Shishu or Nagasaki embroidery. And it's actually a technique that was introduced to Nagasaki through China. Again, because Nagasaki was the entry point for goods from China to come to Japan, people there had access. So this was an embroidery technique that was developed in the Ming Dynasty and popular during the Qing as well. I have my husband to thank for that information, and I'm sure Marilyn knows much more about this than I do. But the point is that it's raised. So originally it would have probably been more paper and maybe fabric fragments, but today there's like a mold that they have, and then they create the embroidery above that. And this also helps to make them look more dimensional, to have them raised than just flat. Okay, and here's the octopus. Yes. And then this is how they are carefully stored in boxes. So you see the little pegs that hold them in place, and they also help raise, give it a little lift. So when you put on the lid, it won't crush the objects that are inside. Okay, and there are the cute little pinecone fish. And I have no idea how you eat these cute pinecone fish. This is the crab. Yes. Again, you can see the pegs, and then it's a little hard to tell, but they have some height to them. All right, and this is the supervisor of this team. So he is posing for a photograph in front of the tie or the sea bream. You will, oops, sorry. You will probably notice that there are two of them. One is darker than the other. So the original set of the embroidered pieces were made in 1826 or 7 based on Haranande's sketch that exists in this museum today. About 10 years later, apparently 10 of them were redone. And then most recently, there was and I'll be showing you that. So maybe okay, sorry. So let's see. So that is Nande's drawing of the lobster. And this is the original embroidery from either 1826 or 1848. My point is that it's a lot darker. I don't know if it darkened over age, which is it's possible, but I kind of think the artist was trying to adhere to the drawing and make it dark. So the recreated piece, which was done most recently, it was a 10-year project. So 2013 was when the project was completed. You can see that it's a much brighter red. And I started so then I was looking at a lot of lobster pictures because there are different varieties and some of them are darker and some of them are lighter. And this ornate spiny lobster has like this blue tint, which you kind of see here. So I thought maybe the contemporary artists were trying to create something more vibrant, is what came to my mind. You'll also notice that Japanese lobster do not have the claws that we so enjoy here. Yes. Okay, and here are two versions of the puffer fish or fugu again. I think this is the newer version and that's the original version. So to summarize, in 1826-27 is when the original set is made. In 1848, 10 of the 29 were remade by, and I think this is also remarkable that we know who these artisans were that made the embroideries, because it really happens often that, especially during the Edo period, 19th century, even early Meiji, we don't always have names of artisans who are making these wonderful works. So here we actually know who it was, Kumakichi Shioya, based on the drawings of Nande in 1848. And then here, these are ones from the project by Mr. Shota Kasei, and it took him a whole 10 years to do all of them. Yeah. What's also wonderful is that I saw, you Google this, there was an exhibition of this material, Nagasaki embroidery, at a museum, I think in Kobe. So I hope the PEM will someday bring together the drawing with the embroidery and have a wonderful exhibition too. Okay. So now I am going to, this is the final part of my talk, segue to the festival itself. But this is, I just wanted to show you the inscription. It's so nice when you're doing research and you have something that is so clearly inscribed, giving you all the information. So basically it says when it was done, and it also says ordered by the members of Yorozuya, the neighborhood, in the 6th month by the artist of Nagasaki, Hara Nande. So that's what's written over there. Okay, so these are images from the Nagasaki Kunchi Festival, which is held October 7th, 8th, and 9th every year. Unfortunately, it's been canceled during COVID, and I read that this October they've also canceled it. So you see, that is the festival float. And, you know, you look things up online, or this is actually from a small catalog. They don't give you all the years all the time. But it seems to me like the The embroidery looks a little more dull, so maybe it's still some of the 1848 ones being used. There are 59 neighborhoods, so you can't have the festival with all 59 neighborhoods represented each year. So what they have done is they've divided them into groups of 5 or 6. So each neighborhood's opportunity to show off their float occurs once every like 7 years. Okay, so once every 7 years, they will sew each piece back onto the festival float textile and to parade them through town, if you will. Actually, Yorozuya-machi has a whale float as well, and that's what you see here. And for those of you that can read that, Kujira no shiofuki, which means the whale spouting water from its blowhole. So it's a very literal description of what they like to do during the festival. I know it is totally politically incorrect and an awful thing, but it is true that whale were being consumed by Japanese. In fact, so much so that there was no part of the whale that was wasted. And so catching whale to these villagers of hundreds of years ago meant a lot to the villagers. Of course, it's not being done anymore in Nagasaki. So the festival itself starts in town, downtown, if you will. So you have to bring out the floats from your neighborhood. And so they kind of parade them through town. And it's quite an honor to be a participant like this, where you actually are maneuvering the float, which I think weighs a little over like 200 pounds. That's what I read. Okay, and then the Kunchi Festival itself is actually held at Suwa Shrine, which is uptown, if you will. And there's a very long series of stone steps that you have to climb up to go to where the main event is held in front of this shrine. Okay, and then here it definitely looks, but you see like the lobster, it's still that darker lobster and not the brand new one. Yeah. Here is the whale. Oh, and it's hard to, I hope you will go home and Google this on YouTube, Kunchi Festival, and you'll see that it's a very festive occasion, very loud. People are cheering, and then they also move these floats very fast. And like they like to it's like the teacups at Disneyland, if you will. They like to sort of do all this. And then the people go, and they get all excited. And Hugh Stewart in the audience has been to the Kunchi Festival, right, Hugh? Yes. Yes, and here I just wanted to end with showing you a couple more floats from the festival that are relevant to this museum. So this is the Dutch themed float representing the Deshima neighborhood. So you can see can you tell that the little boys are dressed like little Dutch boys in Western outfits? And I love this one because there's a great screen, a Namban screen in this collection, and you see them using red umbrellas to shield the Jesuit priests, because the Namban screens are before the isolation policy, but you can see the red umbrella. This is actually a Japanese gentleman dressed up as a Jesuit priest. And then this is probably like the captain of the ship, and then all the helpers on board, and they have like a tiger skin thing. Probably, maybe they're gonna trade, and there's the ship. And this one is one of your slides, Hugh. Thank you very much. Yes. And then finally, the Kunchi Festival's Chinese dragon dance is like a crowd favorite. So here you see the Japanese men dressed as Chinese men. And it's hard to tell, but they have their long queues here, actually. I've seen photographs of them from the back, so they have that long queue. And then, so this would be the neighborhood that's representing where there was a Chinese settlement in Nagasaki. And you can see how crowded it gets. It's like 300,000 people attend this festival. And most of these festivals in Japan are associated with Shinto shrines, and usually you're praying for good harvest. Good omens, because the belief according to Shinto is that there is a Ushigami-sama, or a god or goddess that is protecting everybody, your constituents, if you will. So you must also pay homage to the gods and goddesses, so you can have good luck and good fortune and good health in return. Finally, I also want to mention that for artisans like Mr. Kase that I mentioned, they take it as a great honor that they are able to work on something that is so closely associated with the festival, because the festival floats. The belief is that the god or goddess actually resides in there, and that's how you bring them out amongst the people or their constituents. Thank you very much. I think we have time for a couple questions. All right. Yes.
Is this painting on display here?
Not yet. We're working.
Okay.
But it's big,
Yeah.
20 feet long.
It's a big museum.
Any other questions?
How big is the actual float?
The float?
Yeah.
It's really what you see. Can you kind? All right, I'll go back.
They look like they're different scales, but the one with the scroll.
Yeah, I think that's a really good indicator. Linda,
Yeah, right here. So how many people are manipulating it, or is it?
I think so it weighs about 200 pounds. So several people do manipulate it, as you can see. And then the textile wraps around. I don't know what's in the core, but I'm sure it's something made of wood that a couple men can carry or turn around. And they like to turn things around as they parade these floats through town. Yeah, I think that's, and you can see here, like, there's somebody underneath. And it's all manpower. Sometimes the whale one, I think it's on wheels, whereas this one isn't. And if you watch the videos, you can tell they're on wheels too, because they spin them pretty quickly too. Yeah. Yes.
It's not judgmental, but how are women or girls involved in that?
Honestly, not much. That is the society that I am from. And I think any Japanese members of the audience, but most matsuri or festivals, especially, there are festivals where women participate as well. In terms of the Kunchi Festival, it actually begins with some dances, because part of the history of the festival is that there were a couple, well, one was a courtesan, and there was another woman who did like a dance in front of the shrine. And that's sort of how the festival began. And they pay homage to that by starting with a dance, which is conducted by like a dozen women. I have been to festivals locally where there may be some young women dressed up and also carrying more simple mikoshi, not, float not like this, so ornate. I have a feeling though, the further away you get from the city or the center of Tokyo, it traditional thing. Yeah, so it's mostly predominant. Yeah. Yes. On top, I think is, I don't really know, but these are, okay, so there are they're wood vessels. And my guess is that they may be associated with the fish that you catch. You put them in the buckets. They're wood buckets. And I think the rope is also, rope is often symbolic of the gods as well. Sort of to demarcate something sacred. And I think the rope can also be associated with fishing because you need like a net or something to haul in your goods. So that would be my guess is that this is all related to either something Shito, rope-wise, or also physically with the catch. Yes.
Do we know anything about the red round?
Oh, yeah, thank you. The round, there are other floats. A lot of them are more simple, but they're still round. The red also goes back to the influence from China, in that the color red is predominantly used at this festival in their floats. And also there's a lot of use of like gold as well. I didn't show you a picture of some of the costumes that they wear, but there's a lot of gold embroidery involved as well. And I read that that's also influenced from China.
I wonder if also there could be something with Dutch red wool.
Oh, yes,
There is a
yeah.
jinbawi, a sort of a ceremonial coat up in the Asian Export Art Gallery that is made of Dutch gilded leather that was imported to Japan. And they're little accent pieces that are bright red Dutch wool that had no market anywhere else in Asia, but the Dutch would sell it in Japan. So I
Yes.
wonder.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for bringing that up because there's also velvet that they use that came from the West. So there are cases of other slopes too that will show things that were imported from the West. So that's what's so fascinating about Nagasaki is that you have this intersection of cultures coming together. It's not part of my talk today, but if you go to Nagasaki, there's a whole area where you walk around with all Chinese temples from the Ming Dynasty. Because with the fall of the Ming, they were coming to Japan and setting up the Octopus Center. Yeah, so it's wonderful. I hope you all get to visit Nagasaki someday. Just still going in August.
Yes, every time they set up this book music, do they place the embroideries in the same place or do they like change up where it is? And is there like
You know,
a part to it?
I think they basically place them in the same place. And then with the drawing, they're not placed exactly in the same place as the drawing. And I can go back. You see if you compare, the sea green always seems to take on a central role. Like I said, it's considered like the king of fish, if you will. But then see where the angler fish is there and there. So I think for some reason, they do take liberty as to where to place them. And then just based on what I am able to access through the internet, it seems to me like this is the basic pattern. What I couldn't figure out is when the next time they are scheduled to be parading their float, because it's only once in 7 years. And I think based on Hugh's images that you gave me, this float was not happening when you went, which would have been around 2010. Yeah. Yes.
The exclusive access just through Nagasaki, was this for defense or to preserve nationalism?
Oh, both. I wouldn't say nationalism, but it was to maintain the peace that the government was able to achieve after years or centuries centuries of warfare. So the government at the time, the Tokugawa family, was able to finally unite the nation as one. So they came up with all sorts of strict sanctions and rules in order to try to maintain peace. But what also led up to this is the presence of Christians that were in Nagasaki. What is it, 16th century, when they're leaving Europe to proselytize, coming to Asia. So there's a Christian moment in Japan too, especially in Nagasaki, where they're proselytizing pretty rapidly, which the government felt very threatened by. So that's another story for another day. But so to answer your question, folks.